What's up, folks? What's up, citizens, voters? How y'all doing out there? I hope everyone's doing great. This is Citizenthepod. It's Keina Zontel, and this show just keeps getting better and better. I'm so excited about our guest today. It's crazy that this is the first time meeting her, and she's been in the game for a while. I guess I'm old because I was in the game back then, but I'm excited to introduce our guest today. Legislator, Erie County Legislator, April Baskin. What's
Hello.
up?
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm excited. I'm excited to have my first elected official on the show. Like, I'm getting somewhere, okay? Okay, are you having a good day?
I am. Today's a great day. I'm always blessed.
Awesome. So tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
My name is April Baskin. I serve in the Erie County Legislature for District 2. I was elected into office last year's primary. Mm-hmm. So I was sworn in January 4th, 2018. So this is my first year of my first term. I serve as majority leader of the legislature.
Major.
And I am also chair of the MWBE committee as well as the Public Safety Committee.
Awesome. Okay, folks. So as you can see, she's doing big things for us. Like, we need her. I'm excited we got the opportunity to vote somebody like her into office. So let me get to some juicy stuff. So first, what motivated you to run for office?
Well, I have always been a public servant. Mm-hmm. I've always been someone who has been passionate about making sure that people, specifically from disenfranchised backgrounds, have accessibility to opportunity. I befriended someone who was a former elected official who currently worked in local government, and she told me that my predecessor, Betty Jean Grant, who's been an elected official for years. She's a legend.
Yes, definitely.
She would be vacating her seat to challenge Mayor Brown in the mayoral race of last year, which left for an open seat. And she really began to speak to me about the opportunity to represent women and the importance of African Americans and diversity on the legislature. And it should be something that I considered. The more research that I did on what county government actually does for the people, I saw that it actually was a good fit for me.
And that is the most important part of, I think, this process and the role that you're serving now is the fact that you actually do impact people's lives on an everyday level. I don't think most people understand what Erie County legislators do. So can you tell them a little bit about that?
So there's two jobs of a legislator in the legislature. There is oversight of the county's budget. So the county is allocated funds from the federal government. Erie County gets $1.7 billion. And it is the county executive who allocates those funds. Some of those funds are mandated and some of those funds are distributed at his discretion. And that's also a combination of taxpayer dollars. And then there is a governing body, the legislature, which is made up of 11 members that acts as a checks and balances system for that budget. So we have to finalize, approve, and amend what the county and the county executive and his administration see as what's in the best interest for taxpayers' dollars. In addition to that, we are lawmakers, and we have jurisdiction over very specific things, and it's basically quality of life issues. So everything from veteran services to senior services, social services, child welfare, so child protection services, foster care, the health department, environmental health, the things that people actually need day to day to survive, which differs from city elected officials, which focus on development and infrastructure and revitalizing the city and making it marketable in terms of being a competitor with other cities across the nation. We, the legislature, focuses on people's needs as it pertains to their day-to-day life.
So in a nutshell, y'all deal with all the crap and the city gets to be all fruitful.
When I first met Mark Poloncarz, actually one of the things that he said is county government is the non-sexy government.
Right.
It's the boring government that nobody wants to do.
Right.
So you really do have to have a heart for people. And I think that is what he was trying to convey. If you're looking for the fancy ribbon cuttings and to show up and wave on floats at Black Club parties, I don't do much of that.
Right.
I'm usually in my office making sure that a single mother that's living in poverty has food stamps to be able to provide food on the table for her children next week.
Right.
You know,
the real stuff.
Right.
In regards to the county budget, because we just mentioned that, okay, the city, they get to do all the pretty stuff, right?
They get to do it.
How do you, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, when it comes to the allocation of funds or where the money's coming from, are county governments getting less funding than city or state? Or the city or the state?
It differs
Okay.
based on what the federal government and our state legislature allows us to have.
Okay.
So in-house, we have taxpayer dollars. And beyond that, it's what's allocated from the state and what's allocated from the federal government. A lot of federal government dollars are mandated. They will say this amount of money has to be spent on social services.
Okay.
Like $600 million has to be spent in the social services department in your county. And then there is a part that is discretionary, which the county has jurisdiction over arts and cultural venues and services, a lot of youth programming. So the county has a lot of programs like prime time funding, where different non-for-profits can apply for funding to apply funding towards programs that will enrich the lives of our youth.
Okay.
So, it really depends. When you look at the city, there's an investment from our governor with the Buffalo Billions and Better Buffalo. And so there's lots of funds coming for city projects.
Right.
The county, sometimes that is not as available. It's different.
Okay. So we had touched a little bit on the importance of women and people of color running for office. How important do you think that is, especially now, especially during the Trump era? Yeah,
I'm actually excited about how many women nationally are running for office, but representation is important. And if there is no diversity in our representation, then we have people making decisions about our day-to-day life that do not identify with our experience. So the unique thing about me is, if the county has jurisdiction over the health and welfare of women and children, and I come from a background where I am a single mother who is a person of color under the age of 40, currently in graduate school, when I approach voting on those issues or thinking about how those cutting that funding or adding to that funding will impact my community, I'm looking at it from a first person narrative. What if it were me?
Right.
And if you don't have somebody that's an elected official that doesn't think like you or understand your values and your concerns, you're in danger. So if we want to see women who currently, make so much less money than men to do the exact same job.
Is it white women are in the 70s, black women are in the 60s, and I think Hispanic women are in the 50s.
Yeah, it's 54 cents for every dollar for Hispanic women, and African American women are at 64%.
Right.
So if we want to see that 64% of African American, 64% on the dollar that for African American women to be able to increase, you would want an African American elected official there to be able to advocate and understand what it's like to be you and your struggle. It's important.
Yeah. So are you paying attention a little bit to what's happening with Kavanaugh in the Supreme Court position?
Yes.
And it's funny that we're talking about having representation or having someone who understands who you are or your perspective representing you, especially in the highest judgeship in the land, on the highest court in the land. And I think that Senator Booker and Senator Kamala Harris did a good job at making it completely clear that he does not understand the perspectives of communities of color, and especially what women of color need these days. Right. I mean, and it just feels like the narrative to me gets brushed away sometime in the media, because there's so many other scandalous things happening, especially with him. We just had, a doctor come forward and say that,
sexually violent.
Yeah, that, he was inappropriate with me in high school. Now, she doesn't remember the details, but it's just crazy to me that people don't understand that perspective these days.
I commend that woman for coming forward and her voice, because I really don't think that there's anything that she would necessarily gain for doing that, other than being demanding transparency in the people that we elect to, being our leaders. And like you said, that is the highest position of judgeship that you can reach in this country. So to have someone whose values and morals, regardless of when it happened in his lifespan, be so skewed and so unjust when it comes to women, that does put me in a position of discomfort. Right. That's not someone who not only can he not represent me, but he doesn't respect women.
No,
he doesn't respect people who are like me.
Right.
So I think Senator Harris and Senator Booker did an amazing job at holding this man accountable to every single decision in every single situation that he has been involved in, and forcing a sense of transparency so that we, the American people, actually understand what is happening before our eyes when it comes to picking people to represent us in the Supreme Court.
Right. And what we've also seen over the last few days, so for Judge Kavanaugh, a lot of people are making the argument, well, he did it so long ago that shouldn't he be able to change as a person? But then we have a white officer walking into someone else's apartment, shooting him in cold blood, and they're trying to make him a villain by a bag of weed. This man violated a young lady, and it wasn't him grabbing her butt. He didn't grab a titty and run. He may have put his hand around this young woman's mouth and held her down. That's vicious. So I just it's crazy that black people can't be given that same leeway. And I mean, this officer took a life, and we can't give him the benefit of the doubt that he didn't deserve to be killed. But Kavanaugh, we can give a pass. He's the victim of the media and the left liberal, and and the liberals, right? So we live in crazy
the
times.
Opportunity to pick and choose. There is so much discomfort in that. That's how New York State recently lost our AG, where he resigned. But I think if we're going to send a message in a movement of Me Too, in a movement where our chief executive officer of the United States says such egregious things when it comes to women's sexuality and how you handle them, if our state's chief attorney feels that because of the narrative that's been brought out in the press regarding him and women means that he should resign from his position, why should anything be different for Judge Kavanaugh? If we're going to set a bar and set a standard, we have to keep to it and stick to it.
And, and then we can all just say, well, there are 19 allegations against the president of the United States, and he's sitting cute and pretty and still tweeting every day.
Some would say
we live in what we live. I don't know.
He's sitting cute and pretty at all.
That's what he thinks.
Yeah,
that's what
we'll
he
allow
thinks.
him to think that.
They definitely are giving him a pass. I'm telling you.
No, we see him for who he is. Those of us, that have real eyes.
Well, half of Congress right now is just They're not being a legislature right now, right? They're not holding the executive office accountable.
No, I think they're desperately trying to survive, which it leads to a a lack of trust in the American people. When people don't trust government or believe in it, or it's looked at like some type of reality show reenactment,
right,
that's when people become disengaged. So that's the concern that I have with all the buffoonery that's going on. It adds to this notion that voting
right,
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I think. And that's a lie that they tell specifically our people to keep us weak and to keep us out. Voting does matter. It's a source of power, and we have to utilize it. I just left a block club meeting, and someone asked me about should Sheriff Howard be removed. That's not even in my power to decide. Removing the sheriff at this point would be under the power and authority of our governor. But I've never said, regardless of how I feel about him personally, whether or not I feel that he should be removed, because he is an elected official just like I'm an elected official. And elections have consequences,
right,
and that's what we're dealing with right now. So if you want the sheriff removed, you need to exercise your power on election day. That's how you do that,
right,
you know.
So this area has a very troubled narrative when it comes to criminal justice issues. There was recently a study that came out that showed cities like Buffalo, Cleveland, places like Erie, Indiana, that there are legitimately zip codes in which murders go unsolved. Like, I mean, 0 to a suburb that has 3 killings and all 3 murders, someone is tried for that. And we are also battling with some things that we've been seeing happen under Sheriff Howard at our Erie County Holding Center. Can you tell folks a little bit about what the fight is and what people are talking about?
Well, in my capacity as chair of the Public Safety Committee, I've been absolutely passionate about the ongoings at the holding center. It is disproportionately horrible death rates, majority of them suicides, but 2 in particular, homicides that have happened with the detainees. And I say detainees because people that are in our holding center are in holding until their due process allows them a trial and a judgment by a jury or a judge. And so we cannot begin to think that everybody that is in the holding center is a bad person or did their crime. But even if so, if we found a percentage rate out there where a majority of the people that were in the holding center ended up being convicted, there are still basic human rights that everybody needs to have. A human needs food, a human deserves shelter, and a human being deserves the right to have proper nourishment and health care. And those human rights are being violated according to state reports in our holding center. And that, to me, is a huge concern, because I know I represent a district that is urban, that's in the city of Buffalo, and that is predominantly people of color. And I don't have particular statistics on me, but I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to know that people of color frequent the criminal justice system at higher rates than our white counterparts. So when you put that equation together, you have a majority of people of color who haven't been necessarily convicted of a crime being held in a facility where there are high death tolls happening and horrid living conditions, and I'm not okay with that. I'm just not okay with that. So the case that has been before me this year, we go back to February. So I was sworn into office in January. In February, a state report from the State Commission of Corrections issued a report that listed Erie County's holding center as one of New York State's 5 worst jails in the state. So I brought in the sheriff. I asked him some questions about it. They were in violation of things like grievances, reportable incidents. If a detainee feels violated or mistreated, or that a human right is being withheld or abused, the process in which they grieve is not being followed accurately. So then how can people actually determine if these people are being violated or mistreated in the holding center? I'm not even talking about the correctional facility. I'm talking about the place where you go and you are held until your trial. I'm not okay with that. So I brought them into the Public Safety Committee. We had some dialogue about that. You fast forward to May or June, the state issued another report just a couple weeks later, citing that a detainee by the name of India Cummings, who was 27 years old, who died in 2016. She died at the hospital, but it was due to her succumbing to illness over at the holding center. The state ruled her death a homicide after their investigation. So that May somebody had hung themselves in the holding center. And a couple years before that, Richard Metcalf was beat horribly by a couple of sheriff deputies, and he ended up passing away. And no one was held accountable for his death. The statute of limitations ran out on pursuing that case. So I don't want that to happen with young Miss India Cummings. That could have been me. That could have been you. That could have been our daughter. That could have been anybody, any of the viewers listening. If something happens and you find yourself arrested, and if you come from a community that is arrested more often than any other communities or race, and you just find yourself in the holding center awaiting your trial for justice to be served, and you're in this place where the state, and remember, the Department of Justice in 2009 came in and sued the county because of the horrid conditions. So we got the federal government, we got the state government over a period of time saying this place is just not safe. So our young black men, our young black women on the street, being over policed in their communities, going into the holding center, awaiting trial, and coming out dead, I'm not okay with that. So I've been pushing this and reaching out to the DA's office, who passed the case on to the Attorney General. And the Attorney General is in a place of transition because she's leaving, and the new Attorney General that was just elected, a week ago is coming in. But I'm not going to stop because, again, that could be me. That could be you. Very much so, with us being women of color. No, literally, it could be us. India Cummings didn't have to die. Nobody should die in the holding center. If you have to go to jail, if you have to be held, if you have to be detained, if you have to be a prisoner because of you doing wrong, then the way that our country is set up is you do your time. You shouldn't be dying. And that's my point.
So who is in a leadership position now over at the holding center? Sheriff Howard,
Tim Howard is our sheriff.
And how many deaths have we seen under his watch?
So Sheriff Howard has been in leadership. So before he was sheriff, he was under sheriff to the previous sheriff. And then that sheriff got elected to the state senate. And then he served as the interim sheriff. And after he was interim sheriff for about 5 months, he became the official sheriff. So if we want to look at the 20 years where he's been in just leadership, it's been 41 deaths between the holding center and the correctional facility. If you want to break it down and ask about just his deaths under his watch as the sheriff, it's been 21 deaths in the holding center, 6 deaths in the correctional facility in his 13 years as sheriff.
So is that 2 a year?
Yeah.
2 a year. Okay. Wow. So, and then you also mentioned
how many people have to die. Like before the legislature, before county government, before the people. I think this is an effort on us all. I'm not trying to call out my partners in government because I do believe I work with some people that are passionate about this issue too. But there is, like I said, consequences to elections, and our hands are tied to a certain point because a certain amount of people did elect him to be the sheriff, but my job is to provide oversight. So I will continue to ask questions about the holding center because of these outcomes.
So do you think the media narrative has not been as strong as it should be on this issue? Because I feel like this is something we've started talking about in the last 2 or 3 years. But prior to that, I mean, do you think people don't care because it's not talked about enough?
I don't think people don't care. I think we live in a day and age where a lot of information is controlled by everyday average people like you and I through social media outlets. And I think people have various priorities. So when we are, and this is just my opinion, when we are urged by the media to care about a Trayvon Martin or her name is escaping me, Sandra Bland, say her name, April, Sandra Bland, a situation that happened in Ferguson, then that pushes us to kind of pay attention and to be riled up and to share statuses and to share information. If the media doesn't report, then I don't know how engaged the community is. But I don't think that doesn't mean that people don't care because they're not talking about it. A lot of my term in county government, I found that information gaps with people cause a lot of problems. So there are areas where people are complaining that the county is not helping them, and the county actually does offer a service that can help them, but the marketing and the accessibility to it is creating the problem. So some issues that we don't address enough or we don't have enough engagement in, it's because of the marketing and how are we reaching the people and are we being intentional? I believe my peers and my residents and the communities that I engage with, I think they care.
Votes matter.
Yes, they do.
Sheriff Howard has been in office for 20 years, elected for 13, or was he elected as undersheriff too?
No, undersheriff's appointed position, so 13 years.
13 years. So, we've got to figure out what is it going to take for the community to just vote him out, because I think it's clear that it's time. So, what do you think? When was do you remember his last election? Do you know?
Yeah, we got in together, so he
just got voted.
Yeah, he started his term with me, so January marks another 4 years.
So we've got to figure out a way as a community to, galvanize around one issue to make the next time he runs for office just one of the most important elections in this area. I mean, they were able to vote out a district attorney in Ferguson recently, and the people out there are just having a sigh of relief. Like, I think it's time for us to have our sigh of relief, don't you think?
I do. I think we have to be strategic about that. In my personal opinion, I don't want to say this, but I'm going to say it. I just feel like being transparent because it's been a long day. The legislature might want to consider increasing the salary of the sheriff and make it a little bit more competitive, because Erie County is a heavy-duty county, and that's a lot of work to do. And I think it needs to be somebody that's youthful. I won't say in their youth, but that can relate to the youth. I think that might personally be an issue. And I say this from my experience in trying to engage voters. The youth don't feel represented. I think a lot of my support comes from women of color, single mothers, and people that are in their 30s, because when I talk like them.
Right.
My issues are their issues. They can relate to me. And I think if you want to attract people to the voting polls, people have to believe that the person that they're voting for gets them and understands them and understands their values and the things that matter to them. So I would like to see the people elect a sheriff who... I think we need a sheriff that is going to have a different morale when it comes to embracing change. And I'll say that because I know firsthand that I have actively and aggressively reached out to the sheriff's office, not about removing him, not ridiculing him, only bringing forward issues that the federal government and the state government have found and asked questions about it and offered an olive branch to progress and have change, improve policies and improve procedures. And I don't feel that I've been received. I would like to see a sheriff who is open to doing better.
Right.
In a sheriff's office who is open to this standard where we're at is not good enough. We have to do better. And I think in order to mobilize more people who don't vote, it needs to be somebody that we find a little bit more relatable.
That's awesome, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, you couldn't have said it any better at all. So the midterms are upon us. Like I've been saying, I've been nerding out on everything that is happening. I've been paying attention to all the amazing candidates. I mean, we might have 2 Muslim Americans in Congress, women. We may have our first Native American black Native American governor of Idaho, because we have Gullum running in Florida. We have Abrams in Georgia. We got Jealous. We've got Presley. I mean, like, come on, people. Like, it's like a lituation. Like, I think I'm rolling in November, like, with a little pep in my step. Like, it's just, this is like how I live. But anyway, how do you feel about the midterms? How important are they to you?
Oh, they're super important. You have to break down government within its jurisdictions. That's what I've learned. So on a national level, we got to protect democracy. We have a leader in the executive office that is, you see, I'm trying to use my words very wisely. That is not, in my opinion, doing the best job on behalf of people's interests.
Right.
And
that was just such a nice way to say he's terrible. He don't know what he's doing. He don't read no books.
We have to, Americans have to, we have to protect our democracy. We have to protect the process in which this country is supposed to operate and continue to fight for equity and equality for everybody to be able to operate in that way. So you have to be involved on the national level to levy what is going on in DC, which is absolute chaos.
Right.
On a state level, we got to keep legends like Assemblywoman Crystal Peoples-Stokes in office, people that, like I said, we identify with, that we see in our community, that represent our issues. And then if you want to have a voice and you want to have your voice heard, local government is the best way to be involved and engaged. So we have Angela Marinucci, who is running for clerk. And if she is elected, she will be the first woman elected to serve in an elected position in county government since Kathy Hochul left Congress in 2011. So it's been a minute. Yeah. And women's voice needs to be heard when it comes to county government, because like I said, our powers with it lie within quality of life issues. So state nationally, it's about protecting democracy. State level, it's about people who represent us. State dollars get trickled down into our smaller communities, and in our smaller communities, it's about when people receive that trickle down money, do they value the things that we value? Do they look like us? Do they have the issues that we have? That's important.
So what's next for you?
I would want to be one of the greatest freshman legislators that, has ever graced Erie County.
Shoot for the stars.
I'm shooting for the stars. I am. I want to do a good job as a legislator. I want to represent District 2. I want to make some noise. I want to shake things up. I want to be progressive. Outside of our Deputy County Executive, Maria White, we are the only 2 legislators in history who have come in our first term and get promoted to majority leader. So that's a big deal for me, and I want to do a good job. I have to double as being a representative for the people of District 2 and running the legislature, you know what I mean, as majority leader, and keeping everybody's interest at heart. The elected officials, keeping us all working together and on the same page.
Listen, folks, you know how I feel about this situation, okay? Like, you got to be about being about it if you're gonna run for office. Like, don't take it lightly. Be about the people. Like, you already know the deal. Like, get it together. It's the Surge 2018. Like, we got to get out here and vote. You got people out there registering folks to vote. Like,
yes,
good.
Yeah,
because we need it.
Running for committee seats. being engaged in the process in which we choose what candidates will be endorsed by the Democratic Party, and working on campaigns, supporting other people. It matters.
Right.
It matters.
So where can the people find out more about you and events and all that good stuff?
So you can visit my Facebook page. I have a county page, which is County Legislator April Baskin on Facebook. I have April 4 Erie County, which is more of the initiatives and the events, and my political politics, my political platform. And then I have a website, which is April 4 Erie County. If you want to check out my legislation and the things that I have introduced into the legislature from being sworn into office in January, you can just go to erie.gov and click on legislature and click on meeting minutes and look at what has happened over the last year. And you'll see the issues that I've been fighting for, the resolutions and the local laws that I have been writing and trying to pass to represent the voice of the people that that elected me. So Facebook, I'm on Instagram just as April Baskin, my website, and of course Erie.gov.
Listen, folks, I am like so grateful that we have somebody out here like rocking for us, like for real, like about that life. And you already know how to find her. Y'all should know how to find me, okay? It's at The Surge 2018 Instagram and on Twitter. Y'all know you can also find me at citizenthepod on Twitter. See, I like Twitter. I like to talk trash. That's what you do on Twitter. So you can find me in both those spots. Listen up. I mean, every week is just gonna get better. Thank you so much for being on the show. Like this was powerful.
Thank you for having me.
This was cool. This will be up on YouTube. You can find this on Anchor and everywhere else you can find a podcast. So again, thank you all for listening. And this was Citizen the Pod.